All right, on this week's episode of Laws versus Laws, we have our guest, Catherine Mance. Welcome to the podcast.
Why, thank you, Lincoln. Thanks for having me.
I know, such interesting times. So, we have an interesting topic today. Laws, which everyone knows is lethal autonomous weaponry systems.
Of course, basic knowledge.
Basic knowledge.
Basic knowledge.
Versus laws, which are just the regular laws of human life. Because how do we regulate something that is so unknown?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant question.
Very-
People are unknown. Technology is unknown. So we have to keep creating laws to try to contain them.
Yes. And a trouble that is too. You know, the UN is having such a problem right now. They've tried to make 4 meetings on this topic of laws. And they keep bringing in new people with different ideas on it, and they still can't decide anything.
Doesn't sound very productive.
Well, when has politics ever been very productive?
Fair enough. Well, it's interesting though that like everyone is given the same bits of information, and they keep bringing in new specialists with new information, but they can't decide on anything.
Yes, it's a very complex issue, and each time they keep pushing that date so far back, but with the recent development in AI, it has to keep being moved forward to keep addressing all of it.
And with the pace that the technology is advancing, we're probably going to have to make new laws and firewalls of the actual code so it doesn't get hacked as easily.
Yeah.
Your weapons getting hacked / what you replace all your soldiers with could get messy real fast.
That's a very good point. Yeah, if we look at it, the Geneva Convention right now, which is the guideline for all of our rules and laws system concerning warfare, doesn't have even a section on autonomous weaponry. And they have a basic rule with kind of under the nuclear bomb headline, but that doesn't cover much, especially with how the AI is changing and adapting so far.
Yeah. Like, general laws are really not going to cut up for AI because it's innovated and evolving so fast. And it wasn't even really a thing when, like, the Geneva Convention was, like, being made. They weren't thinking that that was a reality. That was, like, science fiction to them. Like, all this technologies that we have right now are what would have been science fiction to them. Like, it's as crazy, like, it would be to them than us meeting, like, aliens and stuff. Like, AI was such a foreign, like, far off, unachievable concept to them. And meanwhile, especially kids and students and stuff are using AI, like ChatGPT, every single day. And now we're implementing it in our weapon systems as well.
Yeah. It's a very crazy thought. And when we look at like older technologies that we're just barely getting to regulate, in 2008, they just barely banned cluster munitions. So like your cluster bombs, your cluster missiles. And that's crazy that that was so recent, but yet so far. And the weapon technology has changed so much.
Yeah. Often our laws are much behind the innovation, especially in concerns to, like, inventions and stuff. Like, we just evolve, and technology is evolving at such an alarming rate that the lawmakers can't keep up, especially now that the laws are introduced. And they're trying to figure out how do you regulate laws.
Yes. Speaking of that, the 3 biggest pushers right now for this are United States, United Kingdom, and Israel. Do you have like any clue why they're such a big powerhouse?
Those are all the people that love war. They're
That's fair.
the people that are in active war, and the U.S. is pretty much always in active war because we are a world superpower, and like we help other people with their wars. And then Israel, of course, wants it because they're in a very serious war right now.
Yes.
And so, like, of course those countries are going to want it, but those countries are ones that are desperate for this kind of innovation. So can they be trusted to make that decision, especially on, like, grounds more like morally.
Yeah, it's very interesting. At a recent U.S. or UN conference, this topic was brought up of morality of it, and they were like, "How do we regulate this, and how do we keep going with it?" And each one of those three powerhouses there are all like, "We have it under control. We have our own people regulating it," but they wouldn't tell us what those regulations were.
In the U.S., we have really no evidence of regulations for this type of thing.
Yes. If we just look at the invention of the nuclear bomb, the guys after it wanted to create a super weapon and destroy the whole Earth. So there's Project Sundial, and that was only stopped because people were like, actually, we're not ready for that. So
Yeah, because that would be just like a dumb thing to invent. Like, atomic bombs are already like too much.
yes, yes.
And especially now that everyone has them and it's not just like one person like it was originally. And so like we don't even use them. So why do we make these such powerful, destructive, immoral weapons that even the creators themselves regret making if we're not going to use them?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't use them because if we use them, then they're going to use them back. And if we make these systems that can kill people so efficiently, it's only a matter of time before the other people do it too.
Yes, and it's also very interesting to see like this chess game going on in each other's heads. It's like it's always 3 steps ahead, 1 step back, just trying to keep the playing field equal. But also at the 2016 UN conference, they brought this up again, and 53 countries voluntarily signed a contract to essentially kind of help regulate this with like having shared laws and having shared research just to get a better understanding of this. Do you think this was a good push for the future, or would you like to see have more regulation there, making it a mandatory contract to sign?
Well, it's hard because every country is different. Ideally, you want those kind of things to be mandatory for every country.
Yes, yes.
But also, like, it's so hard for people to, like, say, the UN to say, like, this is mandatory for all countries, and the countries to actually follow that, unless there is a precedent of it being bad. Like, the Geneva Convention was only made because of the amount of war, what are now considered war crimes and horrors, that happened. Like, they wouldn't, half of the rules that are in the Geneva Convention wouldn't be rules unless someone specifically already did that.
Yes, that's a very good point.
And so, like, it's so hard because, like, it's so hard for people to agree enough on regulations unless there is a precedent of it, a historical precedent proving that that is such a bad, horrific thing.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the same way. We have each other's countries keep pushing and pushing to get more powerful weapons so they are the ones in control. Mm-hmm. And, like, where's that line? Like, if we look back at the space race, the Soviet Union, the only reason why the U.S. responded is because we felt threatened. And we just had to get them out there first. They was the one who beat us to space. They had the first satellite up. And then we had to crush them by going to the moon. And then after we did it, they kind of stopped, and our space program kind of went downhill. Until now, when China built their own space station and is getting ready to send people back to the moon, and where we are now finally picking up the paces of that and just trying to send it full to dominate as usual.
So is it really people striving for innovation, or is it just in competition?
That's
and
the point.
That's like the morality of that. Like, if you're just doing it because you want to compete, is that a worthwhile venture?
And I think at this current time it shouldn't be our focus just to compete. I think we need to look at it in other practical ways, like if we used it to support the police force that is already dying because not a lot of current people would like to go down that field with how dangerous it is.
Yeah, that's true. But then also with like that, there are biases that are built into AI, and especially like AI, like face recognition systems are completely biased towards they're much better at recognizing white people than any other race, like substantially. And so, like, if you put those kinds of programs into the police force, what is that going to do, and what is that going to mean for the people who the laws are being enforced on?
Yes, which is a very good point. But then again, who's at fault here?
Mm-hmm.
Because those biases were put in by the coders. So how do we regulate the coders and make sure they don't put in
Yes.
a bypass to have like it be hacked or have them be in control?
And is implementing these kind of things a question for the voters, the people who are going to be regulated by it, or is it completely left up to their like the people who resent them in the government? Because a lot of people are scared of this kind of thing.
Yes.
A lot of people are like, we have thousands of movies about like how this is gonna go wrong, and or like we'll cite like this and this is gonna go wrong, and like this is bad. But at the same time, is that just our innate human fear and Luddism that we're afraid of the new change in technology? Because we have an innate fear of the unknown as humans.
Yes, that's such a good point. The fear of the unknown is so crazy. And with this new technology, how do we respond to that fear?
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, we'll have to take a look at that next time in next week's podcast.